Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're back on an older one. I've done a couple of these versions. I haven't done this one, I don't believe, the 2062. It's the Shakespeare 2062. It's the, I believe it's called Royal Maroon. It's a nice old reel that in many ways is as good or better than the pen spin fishers of the time. This one's working, but my gosh, is it sluggish. So I'm expecting that what we're going to see in here is what we see in a lot of these older reels that have sat for some time, and that's just a lot of dried and frozen grease. So let's see what we can do. We'll take this one apart. I'll show you how this reel was made, how to tune it up if you have one of these, and how to get it back out there fishing again. Or if you're not interested in fishing it, but you are interested in displaying it, have it where it's real nice, where somebody doesn't have to struggle to turn the handle on the reel as they admire the craftsmanship behind it. So we're going to do what we normally do. We're going to start by telling you I do wear a protective glove. I do use a parts tray, and I do like to thank our first responders. Those emergent personnel, the essential people that are out there helping us each day through this pandemic. And without your efforts, this country would be in a whole lot worse shape with this pandemic and the virus spread. So thank you for everything you're doing. Please stay safe yourself as you work to keep us safe. So with that, we're going to just take off the external pieces. Some days I take the top off first. Some days I take the side plates off first. In this case, we'll take the top off. We have a top drag reel here, and underneath that you'll see a nice old example of kind of mechanical engineering to form the trip. We have a trip lever, we have a bail spring, we have a solid post axle, which means we're going to be taking this one off from inside. And what I like to do generally as I'm doing this is just grab some penetrating oil, get it on the moving part there, just let it seep in. There's no trouble with this bail, but it doesn't hurt to just kind of loosen everything up. I'll do it on the same thing on the firing side. One of our viewers the other day said, why don't you go a step further? I typically do not take a bail off unless it's needed, but one of our viewers said, back that screw off a little bit. You don't have to pop the spring or anything, but if you open it up just a little bit and let it, it'll work its way in a little bit more. I'll pass that tip along to anybody who's doing that. Right now I'm just going to tighten it back up because I don't want to forget about that later on. Okay, there's no through screw on this, which means that the handle is attaching directly to the main gear. The main handle turns counterclockwise, so when you go to take the handle off, turn it in a clockwise direction and it should unscrew. Don't put undue pressure on there if you're having trouble with it. Just do the same thing I just did with the bail. Put some WD-40 on there. Maybe the threads have gotten older. And while we're speaking of that, I'm going to take some fishing reel oil. I'm just going to oil those threads so that the next time we put them back in, they don't have any problem with that. 3 side plate screws. We're going to take those out with a flat bladed screwdriver. You'll notice that the handle and that the spool and the drag knob all went into that parts tray. That's so that I can find them when I go to reinstall the pieces on the reel. One of the things you want to do with this is get a schematic. I know they're out there somewhere. I didn't get the schematic for this reel. That'll tell you the burst diagram for the pieces and parts, how they come together, and you can look at that if you get in trouble. And if you don't have the schematic, that's okay. What you want to do is you want to take pictures along the way. I'm doing that in the way of a video, but you can use your cell phone camera, use a regular digital camera, heck, use a film camera if you want. And just take the pictures, and that way you can go back as reference points to see, for example, on this setup, how the crosswind arm comes about, the main gear, and so on from a setup standpoint, so that you can go reinstall. I have those 3 screws on my hand because I want to make sure they're all the same size, which they are. Once I notice that, I can put the side plate cover and that in there. And if I just wanted to free this reel up, simply greasing the shaft and the surrounding pieces would probably be enough. But as long as I got this open, as long as I got a couple of minutes, we're going to go ahead and take this whole thing apart. So I believe this is a pin that goes through. We'll verify that in just a moment, just simply by taking a pliers, in this case a needle nose pliers, and pulling it out. And once I take that pin out, I should be able to remove the axle shaft, which I just did. I felt a whole bunch of old grease in there. And once I remove the axle shaft, I should be able to push the main gear out. Just going to grab myself a Phillips head screwdriver so I don't damage the entry threads. And I just am pushing that through like that. And we have our gear out. And we can see the internals of this. It's just a very, very dry reel at this point. And that's what you need to be aware of. In this case, the anti-reverse dog is down. You want to make sure that's down when you go to reinstall. The reason for that is if you leave it up like that, then you're going to have trouble when you go to mesh the teeth here. It may not sit right. So make sure when you go to reinstall you have that dog in a down position. Next step then, we've got to remove that case screw. I think that's a 14. Let's just see if we can find one. I like to use a deep socket for this one. Well, it's a 14, but my socket's a 13. Let's try the 14. You have to clear the lip here, and that's hard to do with the lip on that cup there. So let's go over and get that one done. Make sure I'm using a ratchet here. Make sure that you have it in the right orientation, which would be counterclockwise. And if it's not turning in a counterclockwise direction, try turning it opposite. And I'm having trouble gripping that at the moment because there's a little hold fast that's up on this one that needs to come down. And to do that, you need to push that down with the screwdriver if you happen to have it in that position. Little tab. And that holds it from skipping. Just be careful with these. You don't want to break them off. It just takes a little bit of effort. And then notice where those tabs are. Those tabs are offset. They're not ear to ear. Now we should be able to move them back. Now we'll find out it's the 13 millimeter. There we go, it is a 13 millimeter. Okay, once you pull that tab, then you can break that spring, or that screw, that little spring retainer below. Pull that off. Now your rotor should come up. We have a ball bearing in here that's held in by a little snap ring. So let me go grab my snap ring pliers. This is a snap ring plier. It has 2 points on it. Those 2 points grab in the holes. And then you compress that and you will be able to remove that out. So let's go ahead and do that. It's like this. Pull in. It's a ring. Hold it. If you shoot that thing, you're going to be looking around your shop for it. And that's the snap ring that comes off. Then you should be able to pull the whole assembly up, and that's going to make it ideal for cleaning. All right. Speaking of cleaning, let's go ahead now and just take the little bit of old grease off of there. So I was kind of surprised. I said a lot of dried grease. Well, there was no grease in there, and that has kind of the same effect, right? It just gets in the makes it difficult for the reel to turn. And in this case, we got a nice interior for this case, very good condition. So we'll go ahead. I'm going to oil the dog. I'm going to grab this now. This is spiral gear. We'll go ahead and clean that spiral gear with a brush. Okay, so I just stopped the camera for a moment just to keep cleaning. It took a little while, but I've cleaned out the shaft. I wire brushed it and made it nice and clean. I've removed the bearing and oiled it. I used a fishing reel oil, Real-X, to oil the bearing. And now we can go reinstall. So before I reinstall, I want to use a fishing reel grease to go do that. I'm going to use Penn Precision reel grease. You can use any fishing reel grease, but please use reel grease. Don't use axle grease. I just got a couple comments in about a couple of folks that opened up reels and had axle grease and other kinds of household greases or automotive greases in there, and they said it just bogged the reel down completely. And they are correct. It will do that. All right, so we got a nice coating of some Penn grease in there, so we're just going to go reinstall. Just want to get a little bit more on that little end of the shaft here where it's going to ride in that carrier. So I like these reels. Anytime I have the opportunity to pick one of these up, particularly if it's well priced, then I go ahead and do that, because I just think they're solid reels, and they're probably underappreciated as opposed to, say, a Penn reel or something where people really enjoy the old greenies. Well, I think this one stands on its own against the greenies. Alright, so now we reverse course. Now we're going to compress the spring to load it. And be careful, it is a spring, and they will shoot. So you got to get this into the groove, lay it down, and then release, and that resets the snap ring. And that one's in good condition. We've greased that up. We're going to check and do the same thing here that we just did. We're going to make sure that it's all clean, that all of the teeth are in good condition, and they are. And we want to make sure that we get grease onto that as well. Same thing with getting grease onto the shaft that goes through the body. That's going to help it turn easier as well. And we want to get some onto the face of the gear too, because this swing arm is going to ride and come in contact with that, so you want to make it as easy as you can with that. Okay, this is in the off position now for the dog. We've oiled that. Going to slide that back in. Going to align this approximately with our axle shaft. We'll come over to the axle shaft, and we're going to remove the old grease. I'm using some steel wool for that. And we'll go ahead and just put a light coating of grease on it. Don't put too much on. And the reason for that is when you come through the pinion gear that we just serviced, you're going to just shed any excess on the lip of the pinion gear here, and it's not going to be of any good to anybody. I'm going to grab the rotor next. It's got just a little bit of dirt below, so I'm just going to use the paper towel to handle that. We'll put the rotor on. I'm going to set that little lock up. Now you got to align those tabs with that inset. And we can grab our nut and reinstall that. And that little tabbed spring has two things. It leaves tension on the nut. Just hand tightening that. It'll leave tension on the nut to make sure that it doesn't spring back. And much like a set screw on the modern reels, it's just going to keep it from spinning. Now I was able to pull that down with a screwdriver. I think I'm going to use a pliers to pull it up. I use a channel lock pliers here. It just helps. And we'll just grab that tab and bend it back up. Okay, and that's how it's to be reinstalled. You pull that clip up so that this can't travel. We'll give that a spin just to make sure everything's running smoothly, and it is. We can grab our main shaft then. The axle shaft goes through that pinion gear. Now locate that hole. Find the hole in the axle shaft. You're going to send it through the crosswind arm here, and you're going to align that hole so that you can put the pin in. Just push the pin through. And that's the inside of the reel. And we'll take our handle then. We've already oiled the threads on that, so we don't worry too much about it sticking in the future. A washer that goes inside that cup. Okay, once you get it started, just keep cranking until it's tight. And here's how your reel looks on the inside, fresh and clean, with nice new grease. Okay, so the next thing to do then is to install the side plate cover. I've just taken the 3 screws out of my parts tray. Just going to set those up, get them started so they can hold the position. I use an electrician's screwdriver. I like this kind of rubber coating on there. The design for an electrician's screwdriver is to make it a rubber coating so that if you're inside of a fuse box, it doesn't spark if you hit a live wire. But I like it because it gives you extra grip, kind of a pencil grip. If you need a little bit more or a different angle to work on it and the like, and it seems to do the trick. So that's kind of why I use this one. There's nothing other than that. A piece of metal on a flat blade is a screwdriver. That's about it. This one didn't seat properly. Let's get it seated properly here. That's better. Don't force screws. You're going to cross strip them. That's going to be costly later on. And then let's get this last one in here. So these reels, as you just saw inside, they have wonderful metals and gearing. They have a good design, very simple, not a lot of moving parts. Quiet, listen to that. Huh? We're going to flip this back now. Remember we had that off when we installed. Nice strong anti-reverse. And so the last thing to do then is just to check the drag washers up top here. There's a metal clip ring that holds the washers in. You can usually find where that piece is separated. It happens to be separated here. There's 2 indentations on the spool that actually holds the eared washer, but it makes it easy to remove that clip ring. And then once you remove the clip ring, you can get to the washers. I think this washer is cork. It could be leather or it could be cork. Either way, you just want to make sure that these things are in good condition. These are in beautiful condition. They hardly look used. And so all I would recommend on leather washers is to put a little bit of dry grease. I use Cal's Universal Dry Grease. If you don't have it, go ahead and use your real grease. But you should just give it a little bit of lubrication because that's going to keep the drag washers from drying out. So make sure you do that. And then once you do that, you start the process of the reinstall by cleaning the inside of the cavity of the spool, making sure that all the dirt is out of there. Then you put the one with the grease in, and you'll notice on the metals you have 2 keyed washers. Those are the ones kind of rectangular in shape in the middle and round. And you have 1 eared washer which has a circle in the center and 2 tabs. That belongs in the middle. So we put one of the washers in. The first one in then would be a keyed washer. We're going to do that twice more. I used my glove hand now as a tool so I can kind of smear the grease around without getting it all over my fingers. That's the second one. Now we go for the keyed washer, and that's what goes in those 2 slots where we were able to insert that pick to get the clip ring out. Just want to align the tabs with the holes. Last one of the washers then. If you had any excess on that, you can wipe them off with a paper towel, which is what I'm going to do with my glove at the moment, but those were pretty much done the right way. Just keep a little film on it, but don't go crazy. You go crazy when you press down on the drag adjuster, it's just going to squeeze it out, so it has no effect being over lubricated. Okay, and then the trim ring goes in. There's a groove that's cut underneath that first level of the spool. Hold that clip because it is a spring. Work it into the groove around there as we just did, and that's how you do that piece. And then next thing up then would just be to simply mount that onto the axle shaft. Since it's old and hasn't had any love, we'll put a little bit of oil onto that shaft there so the drag button goes on easier. That adjuster knob keeps the tension on the washers. We're going to tighten it down, make sure that we have a functional drag, which we do. And now I'm going to back it off because there's no sense leaving a drag fully compressed. All it's going to do is push out the grease over time and lock them down. So back it off after use. It'll prolong the use of the drag. All right, there we go. We've oiled up our bail springs. If that was broken, we certainly would have taken it off. We've taken the reel completely apart in all of its pieces. We've oiled all the gear, the bearing we've oiled. We've lubricated all of the gears, built all of the gears and the threads on the screws. And this one certainly performs beautifully. If you want to take it fishing, do that tomorrow. If you want to put it on the shelf, the next person to grab it will make a comment about what a nice reel it is. So that is the Shakespeare 2062. And I hope that if you have one of these, you've learned how to service it. If you're thinking of getting one of these, you now know how it's made and saw the quality behind it. And if you have one to repair, well, we took you step by step on how to do that as well. So again, thank you to the first responders. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions on fishing reels, whether it's this one or another one, leave them in the comments. I try to reply to all. If you have a reel that needs to be repaired and you're not up for doing it yourself, contact me by way of the business card that follows, and I will be happy to give you that repair information. And if you want to see more of these, please subscribe. We're always looking for additional subscribers to the channel. That's what keeps this vibrant, and it keeps us making these videos. So with that, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.